Wise Men of Helm, all because of a pair of shoes. Consternation, which it's a word meaning anxiety, it's something that you expect to happen. So consternation broke out all over Helm after the wedding fire. The townsfolk became terribly alarmed. They must guard against such a calamity happening again. But how? Matters like these cannot be decided while standing on one foot. So once again, a town meeting was called. The Helmites thought for 7 days and 7 nights, but no one came forward with a plan. Everyone knew that fire is put out by water, but in Helm, water has to be drawn from the river, and the river was too distant from the town. So far, not so good. When Gimple saw that his fellow townsfolk could not, as usual, solve the problem without his aid, he took a pinch of snuff, sneezed loudly, stroked his beard, and said, "Helmites, I have a plan." "What is it?" The plan! Tell us the plan!" came the eager shouts. "Remember how cleverly the Jews of Warsaw turned Yussel and his bride around so that they faced the east?" asked Gimple. "Of course we do," came the reply. "What about it?" "Well, if the Jews of Warsaw are so smart at weddings, maybe they're just as smart when it comes to fires. Let's send a messenger to Warsaw to find out how they put out fires." The Helmites rejoiced at this, crying out, "Oh, good, and oh, wise Gimple, what would we do without you? Surely the Lord blessed us when he sent you among us." Then the question arose, who should go to Warsaw? Naturally, the wisest man in Helm. And who could that be? Not counting the matchless Gimple, of course, but Pinya the philosopher. Now, in a town as full of wise men as Helm, how did Pinya come to be known as the philosopher? Herein lies a tale. One day, Pinya, who was not called the philosopher then, came home, sat down on a stool in the center of the room, propped his head on his right hand, and just sat there. When his wife came in, she cried out in alarm, "Pinya, what are you doing?" "Thinking," came back the sage reply. "What are you thinking about?" asked his wife. "How can I tell, foolish woman," reported Pinya. "If the thought is still hatching in my head, let me be, will you?" Pinya's anger frightened his wife, so she let him be, sitting there on a stool in the middle of the room with his head propped on his right hand. A day passed, then another. Pinya neither ate nor drank, but sat there, thinking. Then his wife began pleading with him. "Pinya, you'll get sick. Have something to eat, for God's sake." He shook his head, for to Pinya, thinking was much more important than eating, sleeping, and drinking put together, and he would not stop until he had thought his thought through to the end. But his wife insisted, Pinya, it is 3 days and 3 nights since you have eaten." Pinya, faint with hunger, replied in a thin, weak voice, "Let me be, woman. Don't you see a thought is hatching in my head?" Realizing that things were going badly and that her husband might think so long she would become a widow, God forbid, she went to see the rabbi. She told him how Pinya had neither eaten nor drunk for 3 days and nights, and was just sitting there risking life and limb. Whereupon the rabbi called Gimple and 9 others of the foremost citizens of Helm and set out for Pinya's house. When they arrived at the house, the rabbi, Gimple, and the 9 other Helmites saw that what Pinya's wife had reported was true. Pinya was indeed seated upon a stool in the middle of the room, his head propped on his hand, his brow wrinkled, his eyes glazed with a far-off look, truly thinking. Said the rabbi, "Pinya, tell us what you are thinking about. Maybe we can help you think your thought through to the end." No, replied Pinya, "not yet. It still isn't clear in my own mind. Let me think alone for another day." "But Pinya, you look pale and faint," said the rabbi. No, no, replied Pinya. I must have another day, said the rabbi. Very well, we will leave you for another day. On the next day, the rabbi, Gimple, and the other 9 Helmites returned. Only the rabbi spoke, and he uttered but one word. Well? Again, Pinya begged. Just one more day, Rabbi. One more day. I have not yet finished my thinking. Replied the rabbi sternly. No, you must break your fast. You are risking your life, and that is a sin. Stop thinking and have something to eat. When the rabbi commands, one must obey. So Pinya stopped thinking and sat down to eat. When he had finished, he became sleepy. He lay down. The rabbi and the other Helmites remained, waiting for Pinya to wake. They were very curious to know what Pinya had been thinking about for so long. When Pinya arose from his sleep, the rabbi said to him, Well, Pinya, have a pinch of snuff and tell us what you are thinking about. Replied Pinya, How can I tell when I didn't finish thinking? Said the rabbi, Pinya, for 4 days and 4 nights you neither ate nor drank, you only thought. True, you did not finish thinking, but surely it can't be a mere trifle that a man thinks about for so long. You must have been thinking about something. Replied Pinya, Well, for 4 nights and 4 days I thought, if all the men in the world become one huge man, and all the trees in the forest become one enormous tree, and all the rivers on the earth become one tremendous river, and all the axes everywhere one great axe. Yes, yes, asked the Helmites eagerly. What then? Slowly Pinya went on. And if this giant of a man rose up and seized this great axe and struck a blow at this huge tree, just try and imagine. Yes, yes, go on, urged the Helmites, hanging on to his every word. Imagine, said Pinya reflectively, stroking his curly little black beard. Imagine if this great tree with its long, thick branches, its millions and trillions of leaves, should topple into this tremendous river. How high would the splash be? Would it reach up to heaven or even higher? You understand. And Pinya sighed mournfully. I thought and was just about to get the answer when you stopped me. Now, all my thinking has come to nothing. Tisk, tisk, said the Helmites sympathetically. Then Gimple remarked, Now that's a brain for you. A true philosopher. So from that day on, Pinya was known as Pinya the philosopher. And that is how it came to pass that when the Helmites were seeking a wise man to send to Warsaw to find out how fires were put out in that great city, they chose Pinya the philosopher. At the break of day, Pinya awoke, recited his prayers, ate breakfast, packed some food for the journey, and set out for Warsaw. Pinya walked. The road was dusty, the day was hot, and Pinya thought a drink of cold water would surely be refreshing, but the road was long and dusty, and there was no water. So Pinya walked further. Soon he came to a hill. Pinya groaned and went on. Going uphill was hard. He climbed slowly, puffing and panting all the way to the top. On the hilltop it was cooler, and nearby there was a little grove. In the grove, close to the road, stood a large shade tree. Underneath the tree was a big rock, and from beneath the rock gushed a spring of clear, cold water. Pinya stopped, cast off his coat, wiped the sweat from his brow, and sat there. Then he took a long drink from the icy spring, washed and ate. Growing sleepy, he took another drink from the spring, yawned slowly, and murmured, To lie down in the shade of this tree would be pleasant. It is cool and comfortable here. Making a pillow of his coat, he was soon ready for sleep. But Pinya was not called the philosopher for nothing, and soon his shrewd brain posed a question. A fine thing. Here am I going to sleep, but when I awake, how will I know which way is Warsaw? Then Pinya had an idea. He took off his shoes and placed them out on the road with the toes pointing towards Warsaw. Now he could go safely to sleep, and when he awoke, his shoes would tell him just which way to go. And without further ado, Pinya lay down and was soon fast asleep. Not long afterwards, a stranger happened to pass, saw Pinya sleeping under the tree, and noticed the shoes out in the middle of the road. They looked so funny standing there that, for no reason at all, the stranger just had to turn them around. Then he went on his way, whistling a merry tune. What do you think's going to happen? Pinya the philosopher slept long and soundly. When he awoke, he yawned contentedly and said to himself, God is good to me. I have eaten well, I have slept soundly, and there are my shoes pointing the way to Warsaw. God is truly good to me. He put on his shoes and continued on his way. 1 hour passed, then 2, and suddenly he glimpsed a town in the distance. The first thing he saw was the cemetery, and then there appeared the roofs of the houses. Pinya chuckled, clucked his tongue, and marveled. From the distance, Warsaw looked exactly like Helm. But Pinya was a philosopher, and he reasoned. To be sure, isn't it written in the great books that the world is the same everywhere? Naturally, that is why Warsaw looks like Helm. The nearer he approached the place, the more he marveled. The streets looked exactly like the streets of Helm. Even the town baths looked the same, and an identical town hall. Why, there was a post for the watchman's horse, just like the post near the town hall in Helm. And imagine, there in the middle of the marketplace stood a pear tree, just like in Helm. Pinya couldn't get over it. True, he said to himself, it is written that the world is the same everywhere, but I never expected it to be so much the same. That just goes to show you, when the great books say something, they know what they're talking about. Pinya walked on. He gasped as he rounded the next corner. Well, well, just such a tree in Warsaw as my street in Helm. He continued walking. Look, there is a house exactly the same as mine, and standing just where mine does in Helm. Pinya stood and stared and wondered. He stroked his curly little black beard and murmured, Lo and behold, the whole world is just like Helm. And as he stood there, he heard a woman inside the house shouting, Moisha, stop that noise! Your father leaves, and I think I'll get a little peace. So now you begin? Go bring in the goat, and don't say later, or I'll... By this time, Pinya was really impressed. Will God's wonders never cease? A scolding wife just like mine, nagging a disobedient son named Moisha, just like mine, in a house on a street, just like mine? And imagine, as if all this weren't wonder enough, this Moisha says, later, when told to do something, just like mine. Standing with mouth agape, he scrutinized the house, the porch, the gate, when suddenly out came his wife, Zlata. When she saw Pinya, she clapped her hands in amazement and shrieked, Pinya, back so soon from Warsaw? Pinya nearly dropped from shock. How does this strange woman know that I am called Pinya? And what does she mean when she says, back so soon from Warsaw? After all, I am in Warsaw. When Zlata saw her philosopher standing there with his mouth open wide enough for a cat to walk in, she began to scold. Why are you standing there like a dummy, staring at me with 2 glass eyes? Fool! Go to the synagogue or you'll be late for evening prayers. All his life, Pinya had obeyed his wife Zlata. So now, without another thought, he obeyed the strange woman, who was so much like his Zlata, and went off to the synagogue. There, the Helmites greeted him with surprise and joy. After the services, they crowded around him, exclaiming, Back so soon? Now there's a messenger for you. Goes to Warsaw in the morning and is back in Helm by evening. Pinya became very angry, but not being a philosopher for nothing, he controlled himself and said calmly, I know that the Jews of Warsaw are cleverer, but surely that doesn't give you the right to laugh at a stranger. Look here, Pinya, replied the rabbi. You may be a great philosopher, but that's no reason for you to talk in riddles. Please tell us how they put out fires in Warsaw. Spluttered Pinya. What are you talking about? I am in Warsaw. The Helmites became indignant. Why are you making fun of us? They cried. You know you're back in Helm. Still calm, Pinya answered, Jews of Warsaw, I am not called Pinya the philosopher for nothing. I am in Warsaw, and I have proof of it. Whereupon Pinya told them how before he had gone to sleep, he had carefully placed his shoes on the road with the toes pointing towards Warsaw. When the Helmites heard this, a hue and cry arose. If that's the case, then Pinya must be right, and they are in Warsaw. A pretty kettle of a fish, the women and children in Helm, and they, the menfolk in Warsaw, all of a sudden, something had to be done. Once again, timid Beryl the beetle spoke up in a piping voice. I think I know how we can tell where we are. Remember how I painted Ze Hashul Sheyech LeChelm, meaning this synagogue belongs to Helm, on the outside wall of the synagogue? Let's go out and see if it's there. If it is, we're in Helm. If not, we're in Warsaw. Being Beryl's idea, it was naturally ridiculed, but the Helmites went out anyway. Happily, it was a bright, moonlit night, and sure enough, there was the inscription on the synagogue, clear and plain for everyone to see. It was as though a stone had been lifted from their hearts. But not so with Pinya the philosopher. He stood his ground, stroked his curly red beard, and asked, How can you explain the testimony of the shoes? At that moment they caught sight of their angry wives coming to fetch them as their suppers were getting cold. Then and there, Beryl the beetle said, We must be in Helm. There can't be two sets of wives such as ours. And though it was against their better judgment to agree with the sentiments of Beryl, who was not quite wise in the measure of Helm, to this indeed they had to agree. There couldn't be two such sets of wives as theirs. Truly, it was certain they were in Helm.